Men, God's going to call you to do some courageous things. You're going to be tempted over your lifetime to do the wrong thing. Blessed is the man who fears the Lord. You know what? The number one response I get, I've never done anything courageous. If you don't step up, you're going to fall down.
If you don't like the question, you don't have the answer.
Oh, okay.
From Germany, though, just so you know.
That's fun.
Okay.
Love it.
In German or in English?
What's your name? Where are you from?
I don't think that wasn't the question.
So the question is,
How do I define a successful life?
It all depends on what you see as a failure.
Success to me is not in terms of material goods or how much money I make.
Oh, I did define success by being happy.
I thought this was a simple question. One simple question you said.
What is happy? Feeling good.
If you measure happiness by financially, we're not happy. But if you measure it by all the things we've done in our life, then we are.
Striving leads to certain types of unhappiness, and striving for wealth or striving for things you don't have or striving for more than what you do have.
Success is wanting what you have.
Being satisfied with what you have and happy each day, one day at a time.
But I think what really makes somebody happy is being content with where their state.
I'm surprised. That was a good answer.
Finding a soulmate for me would make me happy. Has nothing to do with financial or money or fame or success.
If you have a loving wife, a family.
I would actually define success with this person and her sister being productive people.
Kids with grandkids, no worries in life, and being more spiritually minded.
I haven't gotten there yet, but when I can see it, I know that it's there. When I get it, I don't know.
I'd measure success at the end of your life by how the experiences you had and the people you helped.
That feeling that you get when you wake up one morning like everything is in order.
If you feel good about yourself and you're doing right by other people, that's a successful life.
I would say if you have no regrets at the end of it, there's nothing left you haven't done.
If I felt like I did better than I did yesterday.
That's when I'll know that I've reached my goals and accomplished my mission in life, you know.
When you get to the end of your life, if you can look back and be proud of yourself for what you've done and happy with the way you lived it, then I think you're successful.
That's it.
That's it.
Have a good day.
thank you so much.
Thanks.
Sure.
Thanks a lot. Cool.
Seth, I want to thank you for your work. It's excellent. Way to go.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate you.
It's a pleasure working with you.
And you too. Have a good day.
God has designed us as men to be generational messengers, sending messages of character, values, and vision to a time beyond our horizon. It's not about us. It's about those who are next. It was Dietrich Bonhoeffer who said, "It is the righteous man who lives for the next generation." One of the ways a man steps up to become a patriarch is by beginning to use his experience and his influence to have an impact beyond his family. He wants to leave a mark on his world. I want to tell you about a friend of mine, a man who became a mentor, a man who I think of as a spiritual patriarch. He was my boss for more than 30 years, the co-founder and president of what was then known as Campus Crusade for Christ. Today it's simply known as Cru. His name was Dr. Bill Bright. Bill was in his 20s, living in California, and had just launched a growing candy business called Bright's Delights when he came to a spiritual turning point in his life. He went from being a self-described happy pagan to becoming a follower, a committed follower of Jesus Christ. In fact, he took his commitment to Jesus so seriously, he and his wife Vonette both signed a written contract pledging they would become bondservants of Jesus Christ for the rest of their lives. They would do whatever he wanted them to do with their lives. Bill lived his life with a singular purpose. He wanted men and women around the world to know Jesus Christ and to experience the same spiritual transformation he had experienced. In 1996, Bill was awarded the Templeton Prize, which honors a person who is what the late Sir John Templeton calls entrepreneurs of the spirit, outstanding individuals who had devoted their talents to expanding our vision of human purpose and ultimate reality. The award comes with a cash prize of $1.1 million. Do you know what Bill Bright did with that money? He held the check for just a moment so he could say he'd once been a millionaire. And then he signed the check over to promote the benefits of fasting and prayer around the world. There was a Bible that Bill had commemorating his award for the Templeton Prize. He gave me this Bible, and he wrote in it, in the front a couple years later, the following statement. Now, as I read this, what I want you to hear is how an older man's belief is being passed on to a younger guy and how meaningful it is to me today. My dear Dennis, beloved friend, you are a key player in the greatest spiritual harvest in history. The family is the major pillar of the foundation of society. You and family life are without peer in emphasizing the importance of the family. The truths contained on these pages, including the 10 Commandments and the Golden Rule, are divine answers to every problem of humankind. I rejoice and give thanks with you to our great God and Savior for His unprecedented blessings. And then on the presentation page, he signed it to Dennis Rainey from Bill Bright with deep gratitude of Christ's great love, January 17, 1999. In a phone call a few years later, in fact on May 24th, 2003, just a few months before his death, Bill quoted to me his favorite verse, Galatians 2:20. I have been crucified with Christ, and I no longer live, but Christ lives in me. The life I live in the body, I live by faith in the Son of God, who loved me and gave himself for me. That's how Bill Bright lived, and it's how he died. Bill Bright's life was focused on advancing the cause of Christ in our world. From the very beginning, he was a leader and influencer of men. At the time of his death, in the summer of 2003, he was known around the world as an ambassador for Jesus Christ, a true spiritual patriarch. Most of us will not be called on by God to give leadership to a large ministry that has global impact, but I think God calls every man to ask the question, how can I use my gifts to advance the kingdom of God in my community and in my world? The question for us is, how will we respond to that call? You know, there's another man who wrestled with that question of how God wanted him to use his life. His name was Paul Holderfield, a firefighter in Little Rock, Arkansas. And his son, Paul Jr., told me recently about how his dad responded to God's call on his life. and I are here at the corner of Pine and what?
And Brother Paul Drive.
That was named after your dad?
Yeah, the city did that. Probably the year after he died.
Yeah. Tell us what we're looking at here.
So this right here is the original church, Dennis. All of this was houses in behind us here. And it was the worst crime area in the city and the state, the police said, when we moved here 40 years ago. And now it's the Russ and Billy Matchett Thrift Shop, but it was the original church right here on the corner.
I asked you what you thought the most courageous thing your dad ever did in all of his life.
For my dad, I think it was definitely starting the church. He was not a preacher. He had friends come to him, you can't just start a church. And he said, well, we're gonna do it.
Let's go take a look at it.
Let's take a look at it.
This is where your dad first started, in this room then?
This little room here was.
How many would fit in here?
Oh, we might get 60 or 80 if we was packed in here like sardines. And
that'd be sardines, all right.
Yeah.
No doubt about it. But
And
now it's a thrift store.
Now it's a thrift store, and everything's $1 and under, unless you don't have $1, and then it's free. We've given about $150,000 in college and Christian school scholarships through this little thrift store. It's just been an amazing little ministry.
Let's go check out the soup kitchen.
Let's do it.
What's your record number of people you fed here in one day?
In one day, we fed over 600 a full Christmas dinner last Christmas.
And you're feeding families.
Right. Yeah. In the summertime, especially when school's out, we have a lot of kids and families. In fact, there's been a time or two where Daddy would tell somebody. He was telling the fellow, said the fellow was telling Daddy, "Thank you for the meal. Thank you, Brother Paul." And Dad said, "Oh no, thank you." Well, I've read that Bible through and through. I can't find one place in that Bible where it commands you to come here and eat. I do find in that Bible where it commands me to feed, but I couldn't feed unless you come, so thank you. And one fellow said, "Well, I ain't thought about it like that, Brother Paul." "Okay, you're welcome."
I'll see you tomorrow.
Yeah, see you tomorrow. And so anyway,
So where are we going, Paul?
we're gonna go up where the shelter is, where we've had probably a couple hundred guys kind of get back on their feet, Dennis, and we've got 3 that stay with us right now, but they have private rooms. Let me just show you where Sean's place here.
What do you charge them a
No
day?
charge. They stay. We try to help them save money. No charge to stay here at all. Eat free, stay free. So they got a spiritual foundation. They also have little finances they've never maybe had before.
That's great.
All right. And Dennis, this is where my dad spent most of his time in office, right here. I still spend most of my time here. A lot of folks saved right here in these seats right here.
Boxing gloves in the Bible.
So I don't even know who did this. Someone brought this to me. They got my daddy's Bible, my daddy's fire helmet, and some old boxing gloves. Whoever did it wanted to give it to me and didn't want me to know who did it. So that's the last picture that we have of Dad. That was a month before he left us.
Tell me about your dad. Where was he born?
Scott, Arkansas, which is about 25 miles from North Little Rock.
What did your dad's dad do?
My dad's dad was a sharecropper. He picked cotton, but he would get drunk. As soon as he got any type of money on Friday, he would get drunk.
Did his dad beat him? Was he abusive?
No, he beat his wife. He beat his mother.
That's where he got his picture of what a family was like.
That was it. But Daddy always said he wanted to be the daddy he never had, and he was.
What did he do upon graduation from high school?
I went to work for the fire department, I guess probably when he was 19, 20, and became a fireman for about 25 years.
Really?
Mm-hmm. Even before Daddy was a Christian, he liked helping people.
So he was a good father.
He was a good father as far as a sinner could be. But he always said, how good a father can you be when you're leading your kids to hell?
How did Christ change his life?
Radically. A case of beer a day, 3 packages of Tampa Nugget Sublimes. Back in those days, kids could go buy them, so I'll never forget what they were, Tampa Nugget Sublimes. And cursing, his language was always very spicy. In fact, he said when he got saved, he lost half his vocabulary. But he changed radically. There never was another beer. There never was another cigar. I never heard another curse word come out of his mouth.
It was an overnight transformation? Your dad's life changed like that?
It did, Dennis. You know, that we were at that little church, and he'd really already made the decision at the hospital. My grandmother was dying. She was a prayer warrior. And she was dying, and the doctors kept saying she won't live through the night. That went on for months. And Daddy would say, Mom, it's okay. Why don't you go into heaven? And she'd say, Paul, who will pray for y'all? All my children are lost. And so that went on for months. And so he went down to the bathroom there in the Baptist hospital on a Saturday and said, God, if you'll let her live one more day, she'll know one of her kids is a Christian. He thought you had to go to a church and that you had to walk forward to become a Christian. So Sunday morning he got up and said, let's go to church. And we all was like, what do you mean? Because we didn't go to church. And he said, we're all going to church. Y'all get ready. So we go to church, and when they make an altar call at the end of the service, Daddy got up to go down.
What was the first thing you noticed that was different about your dad after that walk down the aisle and him yielding his life to Christ?
I thought it was funny that he told Mama on the way home that he was going to go home and pour all the beer out of the icebox. And I laughed, and I said, Daddy, how long do you think it's going to last? And I can see him right now. He looked back toward me, and he grinned. He said, well, Bub, I hope the rest of my life. And he did. And he went home and poured it out.
I've heard you talk about how his attitude toward other races was pretty spicy as well. Did he have a hatred, or was it just a disrespect?
I think disrespect would be a better word. And really, the flashpoint for the Friendly Chapel Church was because of the racial issue. And there had been a fellow sharecropper in Scott who would, Jimmy Lipkin, who would give my dad and my uncle Buddy, when they were kids, rides from Scott to North Little Rock to go to the Boys Club to box. And so in 1957, during the Central Integration Crisis, him and several of the other firemen are out in front of the fire station, and the troops are coming by, heading to Central, that Eisenhower had called out. And so Dad and these other firemen out there hollering, kill them, we'll get our guns, just doing what bigots do. And he looked down the street, and he saw Jimmy Lipkin, his black friend, who had given him rides when he was a kid, walking toward the fire station. He turned sideways, and Jimmy walked up to him, stuck his hand out and said, Mr. Paul. And Daddy saw the other firemen watching, and so he smiled and put his hands in his back pocket and just stood there and left Jimmy's hand hanging there. And he saw the look of hurt on Jimmy's face before he walked away. So the other fireman went to bed, and he cried. And he was so ashamed of what he did, he called my mama. And Daddy always called her Mama. But he called Mama, and he said, Mama, you'd really be proud of your husband today. And she said, I would. What'd you do, Paul? And he said, I did something I'll never do again. He said, I refused to shake a man's hand simply because of the color of his skin. But it was 12 years later in 1969 when he did meet Jesus that his heart was changed toward his brother. He was telling that story about Jimmy Lipkin at a church after he got saved, and he didn't give his name. And so after church, several of the ladies come up, and they said, who was the black man you wouldn't shake his hand? Daddy said, his name was Jimmy Lipkin. They said, he ain't dead, he lives out in Dixie. So Daddy went out there and knocked on the door, and Jimmy come to the door, and Daddy said, you know who I am, Jimmy? He goes, yeah. He said, Mr. Dunaway. He goes, no, Paul Holderfield. He said, Paul. He said, Jimmy, do you remember when? He said, as far as he got. Jimmy said, I remember, Paul. I'll always remember. The reason I didn't shake your hand that day, Jimmy, is I thought I was better than you. He said, Jimmy said, I just come to let you know you was better than me. You was a Christian, I wasn't.
So the reconciliation between your dad and Jimmy was a part of what God used to birth Friendly Chapel and the outreach of this church?
I mean, yeah, the instance of not the reconciliation, but the handshake, the refusal to shake his hand is what was the flashpoint for Friendly Chapel, because when Daddy was saved at that little church there was a lot of prejudice in that church. And so after about a year, he come to Mom and said, you know, what do you think if he was feeding kids at the Boys Club? and he'd feed them 5 days a week. He'd cook the food, serve it. If he was working at the fire department, Mama would come pick the food up, carry it down, and serve it at the boys' club. He said, "What do you think if we started our own church and we'll invite these kids that we're feeding?" He said, "I'll find somebody to come preach, and we'll just have a service in the library there at the boys' club on Sunday." The Nazarene Church, what we call our district superintendent, took him out to eat one day and said, "Paul, don't you think God's calling you to preach?" And he started crying. He said, "I do." He said, "But I don't have any education." And he said, "Well, God's educating you. We can all see it." Dennis, maybe he wasn't educated, but he had a wisdom that people would just be really blown away that,
Tell me about how your dad's, not only how he started, but how he began to reach out and feed homeless people here in this community.
When we moved here 41 years ago, this was the worst crime area in the state of Arkansas. So, Daddy would see the winos and all that were down in this part of town, and he knew what it was to be hungry. And so he'd see these folks that were hungry, and he said, I'm gonna feed them. And so, a lot of times you just take things like that for granted. You just don't realize what a blessing a little sack of cold cuts and some snacks can be to a kid that's hungry. But he impacted people from every walk of life. Daddy always enjoyed saying years later that, we came in down there when they didn't want us, but we stayed till they couldn't do without us. And we had an impact on this neighborhood, and still do.
What I hear you saying is, because of the way your dad lived and loved and led, you're still going to the bank on his legacy.
No question.
Take us to his last days. How did he die?
Daddy left us, he had done a funeral that morning for triplets. They had just started building a little house, and so he did the funeral and went by to get some lumber for that little house, and the fellow that was loading his little truck up said, "Brother Paul said your tires are low. Why don't you go over and get you some air in your tires?" And so he did, and Mama was following, and she went in a separate vehicle. She was standing outside of her car. He put a little air in the tires, and she said he stood up and he looked at the tire and said, "Mama, it's still a little low. And put a little more in there." So she said he knelt down to put a little more air in the tires, and she said he stopped, he stood, and she said he locked eyes with her, and he said, "Oh," and she said he fell stiff as a board. Gone. And boy, I tell you, that was a rough day, but a good day for him, a good day for Daddy.
I've got one last thing for you to do, and this may be the most challenging thing to do, but if I could give you 3 minutes with your daddy right now.
I wish
you could. Yeah, I understand. And you could, what would you say to him? How would you honor him if you were to give him a verbal tribute right now?
Daddy, sure have missed you. Boy, sure have missed you. Thank you for everything. Daddy, thank you for everything. Thank you for the way you loved our mama. We all knew she wouldn't get nobody else, Daddy, if she hadn't. But she's okay. We're all there. I'm the only one that's not living out right next to her. They're all out there where you want them to be. She's enjoying the house just like you wanted her to. But she's lonely. But Daddy, thank you for loving us like you did. Thank you for setting an example for us. You always said you just want to be a sermon scene. You're the greatest sermon we ever saw lived, or ever will see lived. Everything's going good. Someone told me we couldn't fill your shoes, and we hadn't, but we're walking in your footsteps. I love you, Dad. I miss you. I'll see you soon.
The Bible describes life as a race. Hebrews chapter 12 reminds us, let us run with endurance the race that is set before us, fixing our eyes on Jesus, so that you will not grow weary and lose heart. We all start the race, but it's common for many of us to grow weary and to lose heart along the way. It takes a courageous man to press on, to keep on stepping up, and to finish strong. You and I are in that race together, and others are watching us. They're watching to see which direction we're running in, and they're also paying attention to our pace. So run your race to win. And regardless of where you find yourself on the steps of manhood, press on. Do your duty. Never quit stepping up.
With God's help.
With God's help.
With God's help.
I will
face my fears.
I will be strong. I will be courageous.
I will not
step back
into adolescence.
I will step up.
Step up.
I will step up to manhood.
I will embrace the assignment God has given me.
I will stand firm.
I will stand firm
for the things I believe.
For the things I believe.
I will
take initiative.
I will engage others with grace and wisdom.
I will not be harsh.
I will not be harsh or angry.
I will be a provider.
I will love my wife. I will love my wife well.
I will serve others.
I will.
License and registration, please.
Yes, sir.
The license says Dennis Rainey, but the registration says Bobby Hempson.
We're working on this project, officer, and I borrowed this truck from a friend, and I was on my way.
Just like you borrowed the gas at the filling station back there?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's part of the project.
Sir, you want to tell me why there's duct tape on your license plate?
I admit that does kind of look suspicious, doesn't
Why don't you
it?
just step out of the vehicle, please?
Really? Our legal department said, it was okay. I mean...
Why don't we start from the beginning? Tell me what you're doing with this old truck.
Well, we're shooting this video project on courageous manhood. You know courageous manhood?
Courageous manhood.
Courageous manhood.
Courageous manhood. So are you familiar with intellectual property infringement, Dennis?
And have you checked your badge because you're outside of your jurisdiction, Deputy Mitchell? This is Arkansas, not Georgia.
This is Unit 40. I'm going to need a backup, please.
Oh, give me a break.
I'm going to ask you to walk this straight line, sir, with your arms out. I'd like you saying the alphabet.
You want that in English or Spanish?
I want it backwards.
Z.
Unit 40, foot pursuit, foot pursuit! Got a snake king, snake king!